The Own Your Intuitive podcast is for the creatives, spiritual entrepreneurs, and light workers in the world. The shining ones who have been told to dim their light and stop believing in magic. I say screw that. The time to rise is now. To bring your gifts out into the world in a big way, creating a business that feeds your soul and your bank account. You are a magical being with the potential to change the world, one human at a time. The time for you to own your intuitive is now. Hello, everyone. I am beyond excited for today's episode of the Own Your Intuitive podcast. I recently came in contact with somebody, and you hear me say this before, and I'll say it again, where it was like we just automatically knew we wanted to be in each other's spheres of existence upon making like a gaze at each other. Now, the woman I'm interviewing today is so exceptional. She's written multiple books, which we'll go into, but she has created a method for working with gifted children that is beyond anything I've come in contact with. And so listen hard, you guys, today, if you have children that are as spirited as you are, because today's episode is going to blow your mind, just as the woman, Jennifer Kolari, has blown mine. I am so excited that you are here, Jennifer.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I love it.
So I don't know if you've ever actually listened to the podcast before, but I have a very specific way that I would like to start. And I always just simply ask you to share what you do with the world, your stardust, out to the listeners today to start us off.
Okay. So I am a social worker and a family therapist, and I've been working, I guess, for the last 30 years with children and families. And I've come up with a parenting method that I think is really beautiful. And it's based on using language and empathy and compassion as medicine. And it's based on an emerging field called psychoneurobiology, which is really that we all resonate and we all feel from each other, and the impact that has on parenting. So this method and a particular technique called the calm technique, which we'll get into today, which is really an incredible way to resonate with another person, to calm them down, to deeply connect. It's a really beautiful, beautiful way to interact with other humans, but it's a very special way to parent. And certainly over the last few years, I've certainly kind of refined my practice. It's ended up being what I call Gladiator Kids. So these are kids that are just feisty and spicy, and why would I do it that way when I can do it this way, and no, and not now, and they like to have control over everything. But I sort of believe that they're the kids that are going to change the world. They're the kids that might just save us all. But we can't parent them the way that we were parented 20, 30 years ago. The world isn't the same. They're not the same. And that's sort of my secret mission, is to really help parents raise those kids into the fullness of who they are, for all of our sakes, really.
Man, I said this to you before. I'm going to say it again. I wish I knew you back in the day when I was, parenting Ethan from the first book. My kid was driving me crazy. But I know that this is where you have experienced life into. So let's go back in time a little bit. And would you share your origin story with us?
Absolutely. So this is going back a very long time. But my first kind of real experience in the world of therapy and social work was at a group home that I had signed up to work for after finishing my undergraduate degree in psychology. And I wanted to do something really real and be with real kids and sort of get in there into the real world and help people on a really deep level. And I signed up to work at this group home, which is actually what's called a receiving home. So the kids were only there for 3 to 6 months. They were all street kids. So there were kids who had been working as child prostitutes in the streets of Toronto. They'd all been sexually abused and physically abused and deeply, deeply traumatized. And this group home was sort of on the edges of the city, so that it was difficult for them to run back to the street. It was what's called a semi-lockup facility. So they weren't locked in, but all their belongings were. And our job was to monitor them. And we were given a very strong directive of do not connect with these kids, and they'll just take advantage of you if you show any kindness to them. And there's no point in them getting connected with you anyway, because they're not staying very long and it's just hard for them to have to say goodbye again. And none of that made sense to me. These children were 11 to 16 years old. So this made absolutely no sense to me. And especially at night when, the makeup came off and the teddy bears came out and the jammies came on and they turned back into children instead of these kind of really tough, edgy teenagers. I just couldn't close the door. So I'd sit in their beds and I'd rub their backs and I would sing them lullabies and I would tell them bedtime stories, and they would turn back into children and they would feel something that many of them have never felt before, which is connection and love. And I noticed that the next day, when it was time for me to get those kids to do the things that I needed them to do, they were much more likely to do it for me. So I immediately saw a connection between compassion and empathy and compliance and trust. And it was really interesting because the other staff were like, oh, this isn't going to work. They're just going to walk all over her and blah, blah, blah. She's a bleeding heart. It's not. None of that happened. Honestly, none of that happened. And it's interesting because there was another staff member at the time who was sort of on the same wavelength as I was. And that's my husband. We've been married 29 years.
Oh my gracious, that's amazing.
There, and we both had the same feeling. Like we were feeling like, what is going on? I don't understand what's happening. How complicated is it to just let yourself connect to these kids and show them a little bit of compassion and some empathy. So,
well, it's so interesting because for me during this interview, it's so hard not to go back into places that I have been as a parent, because Ethan lived in two different places. He lived in a mental health awareness home, right? So like he had to choose to go in there. He lived there for 9 months and there were workers, and it was all about like getting the strategies to learn to come home. And then he also lived down at a shelter downtown in St. Catharines. So when I'm hearing you speak, right, there's a level in which I'm so grateful for the experiences that you gave those kids. And then I wonder what it would have been like for that kind of compassion and empathy to be in the homes that he had experienced as well. What a gift that would be. But my question for you, Jennifer, is like, how did you even get into social work? How did you like go from childhood into knowing that as
I swear to you, I always knew. Like I remember being 13 and 14 and being like, I'm going to be a therapist. I want to be a social worker. I don't even know how. It was just always a thing. I just always knew. But it was never a question.
Were you somebody that all your friends came and talked to and that kind of thing?
Yeah. Yes. And I love it. It honestly, when you're doing your life's work, you just know it right down to the core of who you are. And certainly it's hard sometimes, but I'll do days where I'll see 11 and 12 people in a row, and I will finish my day feeling energized, not exhausted. I mean, it's certainly hard sometimes, and it helps with the model that I've developed. It's such an exciting model, and families come back the next week and they're like, oh my God, it worked. The tantrum lasted, 3 minutes instead of 45. And we had this beautiful time together at bedtime. And that's just, it's air. It's fantastic. I love it.
It's stardust. That's what it is. So I like to know, like, even back into the origins. So you're from Canada. Mm-hmm. Were you born and raised in Toronto?
Born and raised in Toronto. Lived there for a long time and then just moved to San Diego about a year ago.
Right. Are you an only child? Did you have siblings?
I had a sister who is my best friend on the whole planet. She's one of the reasons why I'm here in San Diego. She lives here and she's lived here for the last 20 years. She also works with me at Connected Parenting. She does all my scheduling and manages all of the technical and administrative stuff. I don't know what I would do without her. So
you took your social work and therapy at the University of Toronto?
Yes. Yep.
I can look at me. I can piece your life together pretty good, right? Like this is going really
well. The MSW program at U of T, which I loved, and I certainly learned a lot about empathy and therapy there. But it really wasn't until I started working in a children's mental health center that I worked at for 10 years, called Integra, which is still around. It's an agency for children that have learning disabilities and have social and emotional issues that are related to their learning disabilities. And it was there that I was introduced to self-psychology, which is kind of the foundation. We'll get to this in a minute, but that's sort of the foundation of connected parenting, which is just, it's about attunement and deep mirroring. And it just really spoke to me. And that's sort of the building blocks of the whole model.
So were you there, like, so when you graduated at U of T, Did you go immediately into working in the home where you met your husband, or did you go into this?
No, I had been working at that group home before doing my MSW. So before doing graduate work,
Okay.
I sort of did that in between. And then we actually worked, we got married just as I was beginning my MSW. And we ended up working in another group home where we were sort of house parents, so it was a foster home. And then we would come in and give respite to the foster families. So we did that for a while. That was kind of a really interesting work. And then after completing my MSW, then I started working at Integra, the Children's Mental Health Center, where I was there for 10 years. And then I worked with the Toronto District School Board for a number of years. That was amazing work, exhausting, hard, working right in the inner city on the crisis team. So whenever any hideous thing happened in the news, we were in there in the schools and in the community helping people get through that. That was a hard job. And then from there, went into my private practice.
So I can't help because I have known a lot of social workers who burn out in the job, right? Like they get overly tired and overwhelmed by seeing the crises that you have seen. How have you had the protections in place not to go
really
that route?
I certainly was burning out at the school board. When I had 80 kids on a caseload that I could see for 5 minutes. I mean, what can you do? I used to call it my strawberry jam theory. If you spread it thin enough, you don't taste it eventually. And I just felt like I wasn't being able to, but that's not true. If I look back, there were some incredible relationships, and I'm sure that there were moments that some of those children still remember. And I certainly remember them. But that was hard. And the crisis work was particularly awful. Like that, I did it because I had to, but that was awful. But I would say with my private practice, because this model is so empowering and so exciting, and it just lives in you. I don't find this sort of chapter in my life to be that. I don't burn out at all, really. I mean, I'll get tired, but.
Right. So when you were doing the school board work, when you were at that point of discomfort and tension, was that when you began your private practice? Do you think that was like part of the lead up for it?
It's funny because I'd always known that I would go out on my own eventually. That, when I'm part of a bureaucracy, and I never felt like that was kind of I learned a ton there, and I knew that I needed to do that first, but I knew that I wouldn't end up there. No, it's interesting how life works because I have 3 children. So I have Jacob, who's 25, Zoe's 23, and then I have Olivia, who's 15. So we had, had a garage sale, sold everything, and we thought we were done. And then surprise, along came Olivia. And it was because when I got pregnant with her and had to go on mat leave that I thought, oh, I can do a 2-year mat leave with the board. And so during the second year, you don't get paid for that, but they hold your job. I ended up building my private practice and then just never went back. So.
And that would be 15 years ago. So
Yes.
There's my math for the podcast episode, everybody. So you begin your private practice and you still hadn't developed this method, right?
No, that really started at the agency that I was talking about, where I really started to learn about self-psychology. So the very first client, and I always talk about this young woman who's probably now 40 something, but won't go there. She was one of my first clients ever. And she was one of those really prickly, angry kids with prickly is just the best word. I mean, anytime you said anything, she had, something to say about it. She'd let the door slam in your face. You're pronounced that word wrong. I can't even concentrate because your teeth are crooked. She was just one of those kids. And I literally dreaded Thursdays because she came. I can still remember this. This is so many years ago. She came at 4:00 on Thursdays was her appointment. She would come early. She would trip people that walked by. She'd stick her foot out. She'd throw magazines on the floor. She'd go in the bathroom and stuff all the sinks with a paper towel and run the water. She was just icky and worked at being icky. And I really struggled. I really, really did. And she was tough. And as much as I thought I had learned about empathy, this child, she was there to teach me. She really challenged me. I literally had a stomachache at noon on Thursdays because I knew that I had to sit with this child. And you would think that an hour isn't that long with someone but it's very long. It's like, I would literally look at the clock and go, how was that only 20 minutes? I was sure it was 40, because the whole hour was just really difficult. Now, the history with this child, that she'd actually been the product of a rape, and her mother had decided to keep her. So you can imagine all of the trauma, all of the pain that went along with that. And the mother just had a really difficult time attaching to this child for obvious reasons. Right at the beginning, when we were doing the sort of interview, she would say things like she was difficult from the start. She would cry in the nursery just to wake up the other babies, which is, that's intent you just can't assign to a newborn, but that's what this little one was born into the world with. And her mother was a lovely, lovely person, but was also suffering and also struggling. What that mother was able to do, though, was let me be the therapist for her daughter. She let me do some of the really important work that she was unable to do. But that was a challenge for me, because this kid was difficult. And it really, I got to the point where I went back to my supervisor and I was crying. I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't stand this kid. I don't even like Thursdays anymore, let alone this child. And I had really prided myself on being incredibly empathic and always able to find that loving place with whoever I was working with. And I really struggled with this child. And that's when I started to learn about self-psychology. And that's when my supervisor said to me, there were 3 things she said to me that, during those conversations. She said, first of all, you've got to go back in that room. You have to tolerate that negativity, and you have to show that little girl something different from what the rest of the world shows her. She has developed this veneer, this prickly exterior, this way to push everyone away so she doesn't get hurt again. She's going to hurt first before she gets hurt. And you have to behave differently. You don't have a choice. She said, you have to show that child ruthless compassion. You have to find it. And you just have to be ruthless about it. And then she said, you have to attune and you have to mirror. And she started to teach me how to do that. And it was the foundation from that conversation that really sparked connected parenting, that inspired me to teach this to other families. And what ended up happening with that little girl is I would walk in the room and I was always late. I literally had to be 2 or 3 minutes late before any of these appointments, because I seriously had to deep breathe. I had to collect myself before I went into the room and got this barrage of hatred from this child. And it was, I can't talk to you. Your teeth are crooked. You pronounced that word wrong. You're so stupid. I wish I had a different therapist. And if I'd be late, you're an idiot. I hate you, and F-bombs. And it was very, very difficult. And once my supervisor taught me how to mirror, everything changed. So she would be screaming at me for being late. And I would say, you know what? These are your appointments. This is your time. This is your hour. And you are here every single week on time. And 2, 3, 4 times I have been late walking into this room. And then what I see is a change in her face. You can feel the difference when you mirror this way with another human being. And cortisol drops, oxytocin, opiates, and natural endorphins flood the brain, taking you out of fight or flight and into an oxytocin-based response. And I'll talk about oxytocin in a moment. And I would see tears in her eyes. I knew that something amazing had happened. Or she would say, your teeth are disgusting. They're all crooked on the bottom. I can't even listen to you. And instead of doing what most adults would do, that's not very nice. How would you feel if someone pointed out something you didn't like? She was ready for that battle. That's what she did to suck people in so that she could put up her walls. I would take this non-defensive stance and I would mirror. And I'd say, you know what? You've got the kind of brain that notices when things are lined up, when they're straight, when they're crooked. That really stands out for you. It's what's called a non-defensive stance, empathic response. And she wouldn't know what to say to that. So you know what she said? She said, oh, it's okay because your top teeth are really nice. I can work with that. I can connect with that. And that was the beginning. That's how we sort of chipped away, built that therapeutic trust, increased that resonance where I was tuning into her. Really controlling my emotional response to her, which is really challenging. And I went on to study for the next 10 years self-psychology, which I think the whole world should know about, but most people don't know anything about it. And perfected mirroring, which most people think they know how to do, but they don't. We'll talk about that today.
Right. Yeah. Because we know the NLP version of mirroring, right? Not like the what you are going to take into a deeper stance here. But I have all these curious questions of like, how old were you when you were having such a deep revelation within yourself and doing this work? Like, were you in your 20s when you were working with this thing?
Yeah, I would have been in my 20s.
Like, I always like to stop when I have a guest and I'm like, I think that we need to call out like a little bit of kudos to you for having the capacity and the curiosity, right? At that age, because most 20-year-olds are like, screw this, right? Like, I'm not engaging, or I'm not going to, I don't like this appointment on Thursdays, give me another case.
That's a really interesting point, and I've never thought about it, to be honest. I never even thought about it through that lens. It just was something I felt. It was just happening from the inside out. I just had this intense pull and this intense curiosity to understand the power of empathy and why. And I was so curious, like, why isn't the whole world doing this? I don't understand. Why isn't everyone doing this? It is literally a superpower. And you can think well beyond its applications to parenting. There are incredible applications for this all through your life. It will change how you respond to other human beings. It will change how you respond to conflict. It will change the amount of conflict that even comes into your awareness.
I'm so excited to learn all of this, because who doesn't want to have less conflict? But you started practicing this before you even had children, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
So yes. You're now in your 20s. Your husband, he's not working. Is he working at the same place you're working at?
We sort of did a little bit of a split. I went the social work route and he went into teaching. He then became a special ed teacher and worked with behavior kids, the chair throwing kids. That's where his passion was. That's what he loved. He loved connecting to those kids that nobody else wanted, which is interesting because he was also in his 20s and could have said, I don't want to work with these kids. But we were both drawn to this very much.
Yeah.
And then we've now kind of weaved back together. He then went on, became a principal. He made an amazing contribution to education, but ended up retiring early and joining me at Connected Parenting. And we're now on the same path together, reaching families.
So I'm just going to bring this for the entrepreneurial people that are listening, because I tend to get a lot of those. When you decided 15 years ago to start a private practice, right? And you've done all of this back history. You've worked in all these different styles of service for the community and these kids that you inspire. So what made you kind of lean? Did you have a real walk in the doors place? Did you do it from home? Did you do it online? Like, how did it build?
Okay, so it's interesting because on the one hand, a lot of it happened and I felt like I was chasing, like it felt like it was happening. I wasn't making it happen, it was happening. All the way along, it kind of felt like that. But I also was a bit of a gladiator myself. So I never really loved the bureaucracy. I was always looking at things from a different angle. I always seemed to take a higher perspective. I never kind of locked in the way a lot of people do in an organization. And that's not to say that all people do, but you can sort of get this group think when you work in a big bureaucracy. So I never felt like I fit in there. I always felt like a bit of a rebel, and I always felt trapped. Even at Integra, which is an agency that I loved, I was a pain in the ass to supervise. I always had questions and I was always why, and I always thought I knew better than everybody else. And one of the biggest things I had to learn was how to be humble and how to make mistakes, that mistakes are important, they're essential, and how to be vulnerable in those mistakes. It's very interesting. When I was a child, I played the piano and I practiced hours and hours a day, and I was always doing competitions and concerts and playing with kids who were much older than me. And one of the things you learn as a pianist is if you make a mistake, you don't flinch. You just keep going. You just act like you did not make a mistake. And that is the worst thing you can do as a therapist, right? You have to stop and go, oh my God, you just told me something so important. And I asked a completely different question, right? You have to be able to do that. And that was one of my biggest lessons. And I was a pain. I drove my supervisor crazy. We had some moments of contrast, let's put it that way, but they were also such beautiful moments. It's how I learned. I still look back and I still teach that when I supervise people today. So it's part of the journey.
Ooh, you just dropped another little piece of information there that I'll get to in a second. So you have a 1-year-old at home and you just started to take clients into your home, or did you physically
here's how it happened, because I hadn't actually been thinking. I knew I was going to do something else, but I hadn't actually been thinking about private practice yet, although I've been kind of it had been in the back of my mind. I had one colleague who was closing his private practice because he was traveling. And he said, will you take this one client for me? Just one. And I was already working crazy hours at the school board. I had little kids at home. And I was thinking, okay, well, I'm going to just take this one client, and I'm going to use this one client to, as a test client for all of the stuff that I'd been cooking in my head about empathy and the sort of beginnings of connected parenting. And that one client turned out to be a crazy connector. Like, you just have clients who just want to tell the whole world. It worked so spectacularly well that she told all her friends and the pediatrician, the developmental pediatrician. And within a very few months, I had a wait list, and I had pediatricians and psychiatrists calling me and saying, okay, I don't understand what you're doing. Like, these kids have been having trouble for years. They're seeing you for 4 months and they're completely different. Who are you? What are you doing? What's happening? And that's the terrain that I was talking about that I had to kind of.
Yeah.
So by the time my mat leave was over, I already had more of a caseload than I could manage. And then I started writing the books, and then I started hiring other people and training them in the connected parenting method, because I have a lot of wonderful, incredibly talented superstars that have been trained in the method who work with families as well. And it just kind of
snowballed.
It's just snowballed, yeah.
So everybody has been like on bated breath waiting for me to ask the question about the connected method. So can we dive into that now?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay.
So let me give you the science first.
Okay.
All of us are really good at mirroring. We all know how to do it, and we all know how to do it very naturally. If you pick up a baby, nobody's going to say to the baby, hey, how are you doing? Like, no one's going to talk to a baby like that. You're going to look at the baby and you're going to go, oh my goodness, look at you. How are you doing, sweetie? And there's this moment, there's this resonance, there's this incredible warmth that comes from attuning in that way. And when you speak to a baby that way, what happens is they don't have language. So mirroring bypasses the language center of the brain and hits the limbic system. So what happens is it releases opiates, endorphins, and oxytocin. And oxytocin is a very, very powerful hormone. It's also a stress hormone that blocks cortisol, speeds up neuroplasticity, strengthens the immune system, increases emotional regulation, and confidence and independence and resilience. And as that happens, as you mirror that way to an infant, they are constantly reminded of the connection, and then they're able to eventually look away and crawl and go off and explore in the world, knowing that that connection is there. So that's what mirroring is. We're pretty good at it. Now, around the time of language acquisition, we start to talk. Okay, so let's say we have a 4-month-old baby and they're fussing and crying in the bath. Nobody would walk up to that baby and go, I don't understand why you're crying. You know, we have a bath every single night and nothing's ever happened to you. Nobody would talk to a 4-month-old like that. You would look at the baby and you're going, no, sweetie, and you're cold and this towel is scratchy, and the baby has no idea what you're saying. But the baby sees on your face a perfect neurological representation of what they are feeling inside, which stimulates the mirror neuron cells, which releases the reward chemicals, which calms the baby down. Now, let's think about what you do when you have a 4-year-old that won't get out of the bath. Now it looks a little different, right? Now it's like, honey, get out of the bath, please. Please get out of the bath. Please look at your brother. He's already out of the bath. This is not mommy's happy face. Does this look like a happy face? Mommy is not happy. 3, 2, 1. Like, we start counting, we start comparing, we start yelling, we start, doing all kinds of things, none of which is mirroring. And if you happen to have a little gladiator who's not particularly interested in pleasing you at that moment because they're really happy in the bath, you're going to have conflict. And so we tend to drop that natural mirroring as soon as children acquire language. So if you look at how a parent will parent a child, an 18-month-old who isn't talking versus an 18-month-old that's talking, which is where gifted kids come in because they often speak early, you'll see some very huge differences in that natural mirroring. And so I really coach families to keep that mirroring always, and to keep it, because it works on everyone. It doesn't matter how old you are. You could be 94, you could be 4. It works on everyone. And so people often say to me, well, how can one technique work on everyone? Well, the same way water can work on everyone, right? The same way air works on everyone. It's emotional nutrition, it's brain food.
So I'm thinking back, can I ask a question? Because even
Yeah.
like I was on a call with somebody the other day and we are so ingrained as parents to say no, like no, stop doing that. Like that level of like they
Mhm.
want something, you say no, they sit down, they freak out, the tantrum happens, we get agitated, like the whole, what is an alternative to no, right? Because there's got to
So
be a way to prevent them from doing the things.
to have an alternative to no. No is a very important word. Children need to learn no. The whole world is full of no, but it's how you say no, right? That's the difference. So, first of all, I have to say this: you're not parents. We're not parents. We're substitute frontal lobes. That's what we are, okay? So, frontal lobe inhibits, organizes, prioritizes, takes perspective. And that's the job of the frontal lobe. So, children don't have a fully functioning frontal lobe until they're 25. 19 would be the earliest that it would be actually up and running on its own. So in the meantime, you're the frontal lobe, which means you have to inhibit, you have to motivate, you have to organize, and you have to say no. And it's actually really important for children's mental health that you do say no. If you said yes to your child all the time, you will create such a mess. I can't even tell you. But it's how you do it is really important. So if a child, really wants that cookie, and in their little world, they have no idea of time. They don't know that it's 10 minutes to dinner. They just want a cookie. And you say, no, it's not time. There's this drop. And we know it. When somebody drops us like that, you can feel it inside. There's like a, right? It literally happens. So I coach parents to just watch the drop. Just first say, oh my gosh, right? Like cookies are so delicious. And I wish I could have a cookie too. And they're so yummy. And wouldn't it be amazing if broccoli was as yummy as a cookie? And I love you so much, and I would love to give you everything you want, but you know what? I wouldn't be a very good mom if I gave you everything you wanted all the time. And it's not good for your tummy to have a cookie right now because we're having dinner. So we're not going to have a cookie now. I just said no, but it felt completely different. Right?
Totally.
Now, the other thing people will say, who has time to do that? I don't have time to do all that. And my answer is, you don't have time not to. Because if you say no flat like that, you're going to have a freak out anyways. They're going to have a 10-minute or 15-minute episode. So take that energy, put it into the beginning of the conversation, and watch what happens. And most of the time, 85 to 90% of the time, it busts a tantrum like that. They'll be like, fine, okay. And it's over. Done. It's finished. And at the same time, not only have you avoided that tantrum, but you've given an enormous dose of medicine, which over time, as you use this technique, builds emotional resilience, increases emotional literacy, builds emotional organization. And you don't need to sit your kids down and teach them how to mirror. They're going to absorb it from you, and they're going to start doing it with their friends, which is a phenomenal social skill. All around, this is magic. It is literally a superpower.
I agree with you, but I am like, oh, from the level of what if I, as a parent, never received that level of love and support from my parents, right? Like, what an uncomfortable place. How do I learn something that I've never experienced before?
So that's a really, really good question and a really good point. And most of us didn't. I mean, certainly in my era, kids weren't, there was nobody listened to kids. You were like, oh, go outside, you're fine. You're okay. Right? There was a lot of that, which, and it's interesting. I'll talk about context in a second, because the context of this is really, really important. But here's what's really important. And there's a lot of absolutely stunning parenting models out there that really help you get in touch with that. And this works very nicely with that, but it also stands alone. Because it is so prescriptive, because it's such a natural thing that we all feel, we can just tell when you're mirroring to another human being. Even if you're observing it, you feel it, because your mirror and your own selves feel it. Your body feels it. You will be able to learn this, even if it wasn't done for you. I take families step by step. I take parents step by step through this, even with families that I thought would have such a difficult time learning this. You can do it. And you just, the more you do it and it resonates and you feel it, the more you just adjust it and you just get better and better. It's like, forget what happened before. Just do this. Really, it's possible. And not only will you heal your child, but you heal yourself. It's really neat. And the more you do it, the less you have to do it. So when you're doing this mirroring a lot and the connection is really strong, guess what? Your kid walks in the room when you're on your phone, you say, get out, get out. They're like, what's with her? Instead of, oh, mommy doesn't love me, right? Because it builds resilience, you actually have more flexibility to be yourself and to lose it sometimes. And that's where the resilience comes from, because your children are going to have all kinds of different experiences in life, and it's all about resilience.
Okay, so you just said something really cool there from my perspective, which is we're not going to be able to do it every time. We're still going to be human and have like the things that happen, like get out, get out. But it's being conscious and aware, and the willingness to work on it as much as you're thinking about it or invested in it, and those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And my favorite thing about this model is it's not if you're going to blow it, it's you are going to blow it. I blow it. Do you know how many times my daughter said, you should read your own book? Like so many times, right? But here's the thing. So you go back and you repair. Remember yesterday morning when I was screaming and yelling at you to get in the car and I told you should just go live at the neighbors? I didn't actually stop and think about what that felt like for you to be stuffed into a raincoat when you really felt like you didn't have to wear one. The mirroring is so powerful. You can do it an hour later, you can do it a week later, you can do it a year later. And often in the beginning, as you're learning these techniques, you will do more repairing in the beginning, because later you're going to walk away and go, ooh, blew that one. And you can go back, have lots of time to think about your mirroring statement, go back and do it again.
I love that. See, at first I was like, oh, goodness me, I've got to be on point all the time, ready for it to be in this beautiful resonance. But if I can...
The whole point is that you don't have to be, right? I want parents to be natural. It is perfectly normal sometimes to yell. It is perfectly normal that if you badger someone, they're going to scream at you. Like, that's just life. Like, if you literally never yelled at your child, you're going to mess them up anyway, because they're going to go to work. Someone's going to yell at them and they're going to be like, oh, what's happening? Like, you really have to create an inner strength in them so that they feel so well loved and so understood. And you'll see that in the best relationships and really strong relationships. You can have some rowing fights, but there's this lovely connection where you just know it's all good. And it's not coming from a place of panic. It's not coming from a place of rage. It's not coming from a place of anger. And parenting, hands down, is the hardest job you will ever do. I don't care what your job is. Parenting is brutal because you are completely tied up in your child's success, and you're literally constantly seeing your child's life flash before your eyes. And it can be excruciating.
So you had your first two before you started to your private practice. Were you already using this on some level with them, or did it like kind of kick in when you started to practice?
I probably intuitively was to some degree, and that's why it spoke to me in the first place. But no, it wasn't until my older two were a little bit older that I really started to use it. And it's so interesting. I was just talking to my son yesterday about this, and he's 25, and he uses it all the time, like at work, with relationships. Like, it's so natural for him because he was raised this way. And we sort of had this conversation about one of the key things to all of this is you have to be using the same technique. And I'll go through the calm technique in a second with yourself. Like, I cannot stress that enough. It is impossible to be empathic with another person if you are not showing the same love and the same consideration and the same empathy to yourself. So you have to start the whole program in your own mind first. And that's the conversation that we're having, that he's realizing, oh yeah, I need to do this more with myself.
Ooh, this sounds powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to do the comment of myself.
Why don't we do this? Let's break it down. Let's break it down, and then we'll talk about how to do it with another person and also how to do it with yourself.
Oh, I love you. Thank you.
Okay, so the calm technique, these are the 4 things that you're going to do when you're really trying to attune and resonate to another human being, or to yourself. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to connect, and that's literally where put your phone down. Like, look at the person, it's all you've got. Use your face, use your body language, use the whole way that you're presenting yourself. It needs to show the other person that I'm putting everything else aside and I'm present with you in this moment. I want to understand what's going on with you. The next thing you're going to do is and this is the affect matching. So this is where the look on your face needs to somewhat match the look on their face, right? So if you have, let's say you have a 5-year-old and they had a crush on somebody and they came home and said, I thought Jillian loved me, but I found out today she loved Josh. And you're smiling like, oh, honey, this has nothing to do with what they're feeling. they're feeling really upset, right? They're feeling really sad. And so your face has to match their face. Otherwise there will be a jarring effect. What will happen is they'll look at you and go, oh, she's not getting this. I need to ramp this up. I need an indication on my mother's face or my father's face that she is actually, or he is actually getting me. And I need all those nonverbal cues to give me that information so that I know that my message is getting across. The other thing that can happen if our child is crying because their Lego thing fell apart and you come upstairs and you're angry. Why can't I just get anything done? Why can't for 5 seconds we can't have any quiet in this house? This angry face does not match their upset face. They have just built something for 45 minutes and it's now in pieces on the floor, right? So the affect matching is actually really important. It can't be, and you don't want to overdo it because that's weird. You don't want to be creepy, but it's got to be real. And the way to do that is by really stepping into their shoes. My agenda right now is to step into what my child is feeling, or my mother-in-law is feeling, or my husband is feeling, and see the world from their perspective. I got to step in there and look around. And that's the affect matching piece. The next one is the L. So this is the listening. This is where you can paraphrase, you can summarize, you can clarify, and you can wonder out loud. And when you've done all those things with the right affect, with your agenda suspended, you're going to have the M, which is the mirroring moment, and you're going to feel it. It will be something that you can absolutely feel. It will bring tears to your eyes when you get it right. You'll both feel it. And it takes practice. One of the toughest things about this method is that it's not easy. It's so worth doing. It's so worth doing, but it is not easy. It sounds easy, but it's not. And so parents will try it and they're like, okay. And they're like, what do I do? What do I say? And I'll have people say, like, can you just write me a script? Just write down. And I can't write you a script because it has everything to do with what the person just said to you. It has to do with being present in that moment, in that space with that person. And that can't be planned in advance. It's a happening.
So I have so many questions.
Good.
Question one is, I'm trying to think about it because you said the first phase of this is to do it on yourself, right? So I get connecting with myself because that's coming into the present moment. I can, take everything, put it aside and be like, I'm going to do this with myself. So then if I'm feeling an emotion that I'm uncomfortable with, that's when I get the effect, right? Like that's when I am like, okay, no, I am sad. Like I'm going to be sad. I'm going to let myself show myself sadness. If I want to cry, I'm going to cry. I'm going to, lay down if I want to lay down. Like I'm affecting it. Then it's the language, right? So again, instead of being harmful to myself, I'm going to say the thing. So Tamara, what you're feeling right now is you're sad, and you're sad because you're X, Y, Z, and, and then how do I mirror myself? That's the one.
Okay, so then if you've done all those things, then you have, right? So let's say you have a day where you've just been a mess and you haven't done, you've been so far from the true version of yourself that you want to be that you've been a mess. And so we often use very harsh language. You're an idiot. I can't believe you did that. And you know better this, and you read all these books, and you got all these people following. Why? Like we're very hard on ourselves, right? You would not talk if a friend came to you and said, I had a really tough day today. Would you say that to them? You have no business having a hard day. What are you talking about? You've written books. You've got a following. You have no bit. You would never say that to your friend. What would you say to your friend? So it's literally having that beautiful conversation with yourself where you're choosing language that really resonates with what you're feeling and giving yourself in that moment permission to just feel like crap. Right. And then what happens is what's so interesting about mirroring is when you feel heard, whether it's by yourself or from another person, the minute you feel heard, you lift. You lift because you get stuck there when nobody's listening to you. And you get stuck there when you're not listening to yourself.
I love this. Now because I have extreme cases of children in the most beautiful way. I have gone through things that I wish, again, I knew you then. But even currently, because I have children with dysphoria, right? which is a very challenging experience for them to go through when they physically, for those who don't know, when children are transitioning from being male to female or non-binary, or they're going through something, they don't associate to their physical bodies. They feel like they don't have a home because the body that they were born with is not the body that they actually energetically and psychologically, physiologically feel connected to. And so oftentimes from the level of a teenager, because I kind of want to bring that in because we haven't really talked from a teenage perspective, when they are in that zone of like, and I'm just going to bring this up because this is my reality sometimes, suicidal thoughts come in.
Mm-hmm. So there's so many layers here because teenagers often feel that dysphoria anyway.
Right.
Well, I don't like this body that's turning into an adult. I'm not ready to be an adult. I have a lot. I mean, I've coined it the pre-life crisis, right? Regardless of whether you have issues, whether you're comfortable in your own body or not, there's a whole layer of this that is just a natural process anyway. Teenagers are terrified to be seen. That's why they walk out and think everyone's looking at them. You know, they suddenly think the zit on their cheek is 10 times its size. Now imagine when you're struggling with the body that you're in, how big that becomes, how enormous that becomes. And another layer is social media, right? And the fact that kids are on their phones all the time and everybody's posting, selfies with the lips and they're all marketing themselves and looking so happy, and none of them are happy. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I cannot remember a time when I have seen teenagers less happy. And that's regardless of what they're going through. The anxiety is through the roof. Depression is through the roof, emotional regulation all over the place, suicidal thoughts. It is, and literally things like global warming. I cannot tell you how many conversations I have with teenagers that I'm working with who say, what's the point? I might never get married. I might never have kids. I don't even know if there's going to be a planet in 30 years. This is what they are growing up with. We thought we had problems. So they're layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. And the biggest layer of all is our connection to our child, right? And this, we're going all over the place, but I promise there's like jewels in here, guys. There really are. When you're a parent and your child is struggling with whatever it is that they're struggling with, the pain that you feel as a parent is, I think, probably equal to the pain that your child is feeling. Your child would be very ticked off if they heard me say that. But I haven't met a parent yet who hasn't said, if I could take that on, I would take it. I would take it. Mm-hmm. So my child doesn't have to live with that anymore. The pit in your stomach that you feel when your child is suffering is excruciating, and there is nothing else like it on the planet. And the most difficult thing is if you drop down energetically and you're now scrambling around in these kind of struggling in these vibrations of angst and pain and anxiety and fear, your child is looking to you. And if you're drowning too, you're both screwed, right? So as crazy as this sounds, this is why the mirroring to yourself is so important. It's the oxygen on yourself first, right? You have to be able to stay up here so that your child can rise to you. They need to see in your eyes a belief that you know they are more than this, that they are on a journey and it's going to get better. And you see the best in them at all times. And if they don't see that reflection back in your eyes, you're both screwed. And that is hard. That's really a very difficult thing to do, but it's a huge part of this process.
So I would love to just have can we role play?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm going to be my child.
Okay.
If you just do the call method on me as I do this, this would be like helpful. I'm hoping for other listeners as well. Perfect. So, 13-year-old comes and sits down and they're heavy and, they just kind of go like, there are absolutely no friends that I can hang out with today. Like there is no one in my life. I've lost all my friends.
Okay. So we're going to do this in two ways.
Yeah.
We're going to do it the normal way first. This is the way 99% of parents would do it. And I want you to pay very close attention as your child in this scenario with what that feels like.
Yeah.
Then we're going to unpack that and then we're going to do it again. And I'm going to use the calm technique.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to assume as soon as you say that my anxiety as a mother is going to go right up. oh my God, now we're going to have a thing. It's going to turn into a whole thing. My child is never going to have friends. So I'm already going to go there because that's what happens, right? Their child comes in and they're like, oh, right. And they dump it on you. And we already have sometimes even a post-traumatic response to it. Like, I was actually in a good mood and here we go. Right. Which sounds so, it's so real though. Like it just is. And sometimes we already start there. Like it's already on our face. Like, oh God, I can see a whole hour of this coming. Right. So already, this is already the energy. Okay. Okay. So I'm already there and you're your child. What's your child's name?
Karma.
Karma. Karma's coming in and dropping this heavy bomb. Okay, go ahead, Karma. And I'm going to be a typical mom.
I have no friends. Like, it doesn't matter how many people I reach out to. Like, there's.
Okay, but honey, what about that one friend you talked about last week? You said you met somebody who was kind of cool. What about them?
They don't call me back. No one's answering.
Well, maybe they're busy. Maybe they had their phone taken away. Like, you can't just give up, honey. You got to just keep putting yourself out there.
I don't think you get it. Nobody is like, I have nobody. There is no friends that keep canceling on me.
I know, and that sucks, but you know what? If that's what you believe, then that's what's going to happen. Like you have to take charge of your life. Like, let's look at the steps that you can take.
I'm only laughing because Jen, what are you? Are you like channeling me on some level? Coach Mom comes out, right?
Like, but how does Coach Mom feel to Karma right now?
Unheard.
Yeah, and then you start with, oh my God, I don't want your voodoo. I don't want your stuff. Like, I'm not one of your clients. You're not hearing me. You don't get it. That's what you're going to start hearing. And so as in that incantation of Karma, you felt what? Unheard?
And more sad. Like I felt like I dipped lower, right? Like it's having the opposing effect that I would want it to have. It's like I'm feeling more alone and more unheard, more not seen. Like
exactly.
Better.
So Karma has one choice here. So if we kept this going, what would happen is there would be a continuation of trying to convince me of how hopeless this situation is.
Yes.
Right? Because I'm not getting it, there would be no choice, right? And so as a child has to convince their parent of how bad it is, guess what starts happening? They start convincing themselves. Oh my God, that's true. And they actually the heaviness starts to pull them right under. Now, a lot of really sensitive children, gifted kids for sure, gladiators for sure, have to touch the bottom. They have to, and this, I'll tell you where this came from, but they literally have to touch the bottom and they have to bring you down with them. And when they have touched the bottom and they are convinced that you feel as shitty as they feel, they can float back up to the top. You're then a dish rag and ruined for the night, but they start to float back up. So this is what I call a behavioral vortex. So Jacob will appreciate this because he works with me at Connected Parenting now. So he's my oldest son. Total gifted kid, big feelings, big emotions. When he was about 14, and we'd have this routine when he was a teenager where my husband would play hockey on Thursday nights. I would hear the door lock. I'd hear him go out with his equipment. I'd hear the door lock and I'd go, and I'd wait. And within 5 minutes, the door would open. I hate my life. There's nothing to look forward to. I don't have any friends. The same conversation, right? And I would do everything I just did. We'd get into these multiple hour-long conversations where I'm trying to convince him of why it's better, and he'd get more and more distraught and more depressed until I literally would want to say, you know what, you're right. There's no hope, because I literally would touch the bottom with him. At 14, Jacob said to me, not when we were in the middle of one of these conversations, but he basically said to me, I think I know what's happening. I can't feel better until I am convinced that you feel as horrible as I feel. And once I have transferred that to you, then I feel better. And up he goes. And so that, and thankfully to him, I've been able to really talk about that with many, many parents and their highly sensitive kids, because you can't go down there with them. It doesn't really help that much. And if you do, you have to stay up here while you do it, right? And that's where the mirroring comes in, that you can hear them, you can resonate with them, but you're up here knowing that they are going to meet you. Now I'm going to put an overlay on this because this is really important regarding this conversation. An exercise that I teach parents to do, and you can do this with everybody, somebody at work that you don't like or a boss that you're not getting along with, doesn't matter. You want to have a conversation while your kid is like saying all that stuff to you. You're having an imaginary conversation in your head with the highest version of that person. So let's say you're having a conversation with Karma where you're forehead to forehead, holding hands, but I know what you're going through. I get it. And Karma's saying, you know what? This is me figuring out who I am, struggling with who I am in this lifetime, finding my way, but this is what I'm here for. This is what I'm on this planet to do. Don't worry about me, Mom. And you're like, I don't worry about you. I know you got this. This is all part of what you're going through. I'm here for you. You want to cry hearing this, right? That's the conversation that you're having with the highest version of Karma while he's going, she. Which one? He. Transitioning to he?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where you have to be. Okay. Because if you're down here, he can't find his way back.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the conversation that you're having. That keeps your energy up here. Then you start mirroring. Okay, so now we're going to mirror again.
Okay.
So come at me again, Karma.
Let me get in my teenager drama class. Here we go. All right. Enter Karma, heavy. Sits down at the table, truly heavy. Like just, you can feel it's palpable in the air. And it's like, there is nobody for me, Mom. Like there is nobody that I can hang out with. Like it's been the worst summer ever. Nobody is free to hang out.
And it's not because you haven't tried. Like you've actually put some feelers out there and there's just nothing.
Yeah. It's so funny how I'm already like, I don't know what to say to that as a teenager. Right? I'm like, you're right, I have.
So keep going, because I want people to feel this. So
right. So like, yeah, but I have, but I don't understand why nobody is like, they keep canceling.
I know, it's so weird. Like you put yourself out there and then then what happens? They just don't answer? They just ghost you?
Yeah. Like, so, like I call them, they don't call me back. I leave messages. They know they've seen them. They don't answer.
This sucks so much. I really don't get it. I mean, I see your beauty. I see how wonderful you are. But these people they don't get it. And there's nobody, not one single person. And you've been saying this for months, maybe even years to me. This is really part of your reality right now. Karma doesn't know.
As Karma, I want to cry.
You might. Okay, but you might, you see? That's okay. Crying gets a bad rap. Crying is so important. Crying is so cleansing. Crying is so freeing. Maybe one of the hardest things you have to be able to do with a child that's suffering is soothe them. You've got to just be able to stay in that place. Don't talk him out of it. Don't convince him why it's not going to last. Keep your life lessons out of it. Keep all the wonderful things you've learned out of it. There will be a time and there will be a place for that. It's not then. If you have to get on the ground and rub his back and just, brush the hair from his eyes and just say, buddy, we're just going to sit here. We're going to sit here. I got you. I'm here. And that's awful. And it's terrifying as a parent. Because everything in you is like, no, must pull him out, must pull him up. I can't take it. Right? So we have to understand is a lot of, because we're human, it's like, you need to feel better so I can feel better because this is awful. Right? So if your agenda is, I can't take this, I can't go through this again, I can't be here with you, this is so dark, this is so scary, I can't, then you're going to be there longer and it's going to be more intense. You have to learn to just sit and just soothe. And it's terrifying, okay? But two things. One, if things really are that bad and they don't soothe themselves and they can't, and you need to call an ambulance or there is a place you need to go, you would know in that moment. But most of the time, they just need you to soothe them. If somebody fell, if your kid fell and broke his leg, You wouldn't go, you know what? You got your other leg, and you know what? We learned all kinds of techniques about how to manage pain. Let's try those right now. Let's you're gonna look back one day and laugh. Hey, you've always wanted crutches. Like, you would never do that. You would go, oh my gosh, honey, let's put something on this. Oh, that hurts so much. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's what you would do. Why is it any different if it's emotional pain? It shouldn't be any different. So what you'll find, and that's a pretty common scenario with a teenager, find that once they feel deeply hurt, once that resonance is there, they will lift. And you will know when it's time to lift, because they'll say, well, do you think I should do this? And did that happen to you? And what did you learn in give me one of your latest things. I'm ready to hear it. They will tell you when it's time to start figuring out. And it needs to be driven by them, not you. My puppy is outside the door, like screaming. Can you hear it, or it's okay?
No, I can't hear it at all.
She'll be fine. All right.
Well, we're coming close to closeout, and like, I just want to like hang out with you forever, Jennifer, and I don't want this like conversation to ever end. And I'm sure people are listening and feeling the same way. So if they are like, oh my goodness, how does you get us? You get us, and you get the kids, which is like a double whammy, right? Like, that's a pretty powerful combination. So where would we find you? Like, where's somebody going to be able to reach out to you?
So you can go to connectedparenting.com, and on there I have my books are on there, but you can also go on Amazon. They're on Amazon. They're everywhere. I have a podcast which actually takes you through, and I have lots of listeners who just listen to them over and over again, because sometimes you just need that help when you're struggling with your child. I have an online course. There's two versions. There's a quick start, and then there's the full course. And I'm actually just launching in September a private Facebook group and some live group coaching for families. And there'll also be individual. There's like a parenting program that you can go through. If you want to see one of us one-on-one, you can contact connectedparenting.com and put in a request, and Rebecca will get in touch with you, and one of our therapists can get in touch with you. There's a million ways.
That's like, so, but the first phase is just going to the website, and we can find all of this from there, kind of like through all of those different pathways. But incredible, like, what a game-changing experience for everyone involved. Like, I can't wait, because I'm not gonna lie, having done the role modeling is my favorite. Like, it just makes a big difference.
You know what's so interesting is that your mirror neuron cells do not know the difference, right? No. They can't tell. So what was the feeling like the second time? What were you feeling?
Well, I said I wanted to cry, because I felt seen and heard. Like, I felt like, my emotion was valid. And it's interesting, because from the level of how I actually work with adults, I teach that, but I just experienced it from the level of a 13-year-old through doing this with you. So that felt really powerful, as like almost like a transference.
It is really powerful. And I want people to realize this isn't just for parenting. Use this on anyone and everyone. It is the rewards that you get back, the kinds of conversations, the moments that you'll have with other people because you can do this. I've said it 2 or 3 times in this call, but it really is a superpower. And you can de-escalate someone. It's phenomenal. I mean, I would love for the whole world to use this. And over time, what ends up happening is that you just develop this resilience, and you stop being afraid of conflict, because you're like, I know what to do. I got this. And it's really just about meeting someone where they are. It's soothing them. And it's about having this loving detachment, if that makes sense. Like, I can love you through this, and I can stay up here while you're down here. Mm-hmm. And the other person will rise up to meet you. And then you have to do that with yourself.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of my listeners are coaches and, consultants and those kinds of things. And here we always think that we're supporting by, utilizing what our gifts are with our friends and our family and our husbands and our wives and all that. And all of a sudden it's like, or
right? Because you can
when they're ready.
Great stuff, but you cannot start there. You have to start with resonance. You have to start with getting them, and you have to be able to soothe them. And if your child has emotional issues, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. There is nothing more terrifying for a parent.
Yeah.
But you must soothe them. I mean, obviously you have to make a decision if you have to call an ambulance or not, but
Right.
sometimes it's literally just sitting there and going, there's nothing I can say right now. This is just a dark, awful place, and I am here, and I got you. Right?
Wow.
That's it. And it's really hard as a parent, but you will see the more you stay there with them, the less they need to go there.
Beautiful.
And they don't want to be there. It's
No.
not fun down there.
No.
It's more fun up here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for your gift and sharing it with us. And I know that you're impacting everyone who listens to this podcast and beyond, everybody you come in contact with. So
honestly, it's such a joy. It is such a joy. And my secret plan is that the more people that know how to do this and do this with others, the more it kind of transfers all the way around the planet. And for every child whose parent learns to do this, that's a future parent who will know how to do this. So it's the gift that actually is generational. So.
I love it. And I do like just to ask this one question. It doesn't even like feel like it's the right question to ask, but I secretly want to know these because I'm a huge book nerd. And I'm going to guess it's this one because I'm holding your book right now. But like if there is like, but from your perspective of your life, your entire life, and just one book that impacted your journey and where you kind of stepped fully into who you are, what would it be?
So I don't know if it would be a book. It would have been the teachings of Heinz Kohut, who developed many, many years ago, way before his time, self-psychology. I would say that's probably, for me, his teachings has just been, they're not easy. So if you want to go read anything on self-psychology, get a Tylenol and a glass of water, because you're going to complicated. It's just the most, I don't understand why, but so I've kind of distilled it into bite sizes.
Yeah.
Because he talks about empathic repair and empathic failure, and he talks about self objects, and it gets very complicated, but the distilled ideas probably had the biggest impact on my career and also on my life. Like if I think about how it's just a reflex now to use this, like I don't even fear conflict anymore, and the most amazing things happen out of conflict, and if it doesn't become de-escalated, it was never about me, right? It was about whatever is happening to that person. So
amazing. Well, I'm going to put all your information in the show notes. People are going to have access to this. I'm so grateful for this conversation and for the impact it's made in my life. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be.
All right. We will talk soon. Okay. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as my listeners. I'm just saying, like that was a bomb. That seriously love bomb that just dropped on everyone.
I love it.
All right.